Hij is heel snel bezig.
Ja, wat ik dus gedaan heb is de camera van de dochter van Jeroen. Die geluid doet het niet meer hier aan de zijkant. Dus daarom heb ik nu een microfoon geplaatst voor dat boxje. En dat is voor muziek denk ik niet zo goed. Maar in ieder geval voor de stemmen, die komen helder over.
En die catbox, zou dat die ook niet behuigen?
Ja, maar ik ben bang dat dat misschien ook weer dingen mixt. Zou eventueel nog niet kunnen.
Ja, gewoon proberen kijken die geluidkwaliteit of zo.
Ja.
Wel iets goed gevoed worden.
Ja, dat zou ook kunnen.
Beste mensen, dear visitors, mag ik jullie vragen een plekje te gaan zoeken, zodat we met het programma kunnen beginnen. Zo, we wachten even nog op de laatste mensen. We hebben een volle dag voor de boeg. Dus ik zal vandaag streng de tijd moeten bewaken. Ja, goed. Goedemorgen. We gaan eraan beginnen aan deze prachtige dag. Ontworpen, mag ik wel zeggen, door Andreas Wöhle. We zijn hier met familie, vrienden, collega's van Andreas. Hartelijk welkom op dit symposium dat in het teken staat van out of the box denken en ervaren. Family, friends, colleagues of Andreas Wöhle, a warm welcome to this symposium that will be dedicated to thinking and experiencing out of the box. Familie, Freunde, Kollegen von Andreas Wöhle, herzlich willkommen bei diesem Symposium, das im Zeichen steht von Denken und Erfahren out of the box. Mijn naam is Hans Alma. Ik moet een kleine correctie aanbrengen op de informatie die u heeft gekregen, want ik werk niet langer op de Universiteit voor Humanistiek, maar aan de Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, waar ik als leraar geestelijke zorg en religieus humanisme ben. Ik ken Andreas al heel lang, uit de tijd dat hij predikant was in Apeldoorn, waar mijn ouders woonden. Een verbindende schakel in professionele zin is onze gedeelde interesse in de rol van verbeeldingskracht en kunst, waar het om existentiële en religieuze vragen gaat. We markeren vandaag het moment in de loopbaan van Andreas waarop hij emeritus predikant wordt. Ik spreek liever niet van een afscheid, want alleen al het programma van dit symposium toont aan dat Andreas nog heel wat van plan is. Hij nodigt ons vandaag uit om te spelen binnen het kader van een structuur die hij met zorg heeft ontwikkeld. Daarmee is het centrale thema van deze dag aangegeven. Orde en spel, of in meer klassiek theologische termen, wet en evangelie. Dit thema duidt op een spanningsveld dat Andreas als predikant en theoloog op uiteenlopende wijze heeft onderzocht. In gesprek met de Joodse traditie, met systematische en mystieke vormen van christelijke theologie, maar ook met de taal van muziek dans, choreografie, performance, beeldende kunsten en meditatie. Het programma van deze dag vormt als het ware een proeverij van al deze elementen. In a kaleidoscopic combination of lectures, music, performance and the presentation of artwork by glass artist Simsa Cho, we will be able to taste the ingredients Andreas has been working with in his theology. Wir werden spielen mit den Bausteinen von Andreas Theologie und mit den Sprachen, die Teil seines Lebens sind. We zullen niet alles begrijpen en veel zal aangeraakt worden zonder dat we vandaag de tijd hebben om het uit te diepen. We vragen u vooral om oren, ogen en hart wijd te openen en alles wat u verrast, pleziert, irriteert en verwondert te omarmen. Neem mee wat u de moeite waard vindt om nader te onderzoeken en ga daar ook na vandaag mee aan de slag. Open your eyes, ears and heart. Be surprised, pleased, irritated and amazed. And please take with you what you want to further reflect on at ease when you are at home. Wat betreft de talen die vandaag gesproken zullen worden, in het tekstboek dat u heeft gekregen, vindt u vertalingen in gecomprimeerde vorm. Dit stelt u in staat om ook als in vreemde taal gesproken wordt, de inhoudelijke lijn te volgen. In the textbook you have received, the texts of lectures and performances have been condensed and summarized in translation. It is our hope that this provides everyone with a clear gateway into the central themes of the symposium. In dem Textbuch, das Sie bekommen haben, finden Sie die Texte, die im Rahmen des Symposiums als Vorträge oder Performances präsentiert werden, in eine zusammenfassende Übersetzung. Unsere Hoffnung ist, dass auf diese Weise für alle Teilnehmenden ein guter Zugang zu den inhaltlichen Linien des Symposiums gewährleistet wird. Nog even kort iets over de inhoud van dit symposium. Lutherse theologie out of the box. Dat klinkt speels. En zo is het ook bedoeld. Maar je zult begrijpen dat dit symposium een serieuze ondertoon heeft, die soms ook boventoon mag worden. Het gaat naast speelsheid ook om ordening. Juist in het spanningsveld tussen die twee kan er iets gebeuren, zoals we in de muziek van Bach, McGowan en Frank zullen horen. Het gaat om de vraag wat Lutherse theologie kan bijdragen aan een wereld die dolgedraaid lijkt te zijn. We onderzoeken wat zij kan betekenen voor heelwording, wat haar zeggingskracht is in het licht van de klimaatcrisis en hoe zij lichamelijke ervaring, gemeenschap en spiritualiteit bij elkaar kan brengen. De rijkdom van de Lutherse traditie komt vandaag tot leven in de uiteenlopende symposiumbijdragen die haar vitaliteit en relevantie ervaarbaar zullen maken. We hopen dat u zich hierin zult onderdompelen, dat u steeds weer geprikkeld zult opveren, dat u zich geen moment zult vervelen en dat u niet zult vergeten momenten te nemen voor zelfzorg en gesprek en voor het genot van hapjes en verrassende drankjes. Zet u schrap, neem stevig plaats op uw stoel, we gaan eraan beginnen. Zoals het een symposium dat in het teken van de Lutherse traditie staat past, beginnen we met muziek van Johann Sebastian Bach. Wim Dijkstra, kantororganist van de oude Lutherse Kerk, speelt voor ons Bach's toccata en fuga in D-klein. This iconic organ work will present us with a musical metaphor for the dynamic tension between structure and freedom, or in theological terms, between law and gospel. Symposium.
Wim, ga door.
first lecture will be presented by Boris Gunjevic, tutor and lecturer in religious philosophy and systematic theology and Reformation studies at Westfield House in Cambridge, United Kingdom. He reimagines the classical Lutheran theme of law and gospel as play and order, showing how play is not mere entertainment, but a serious, life-giving participation in God's creation. Boris, the floor is yours.
As Christopher Wöhle says, I'm not sure if I'm glad to be here, but I'm for sure glad that I'm invited. So thank you very much, Andreas, that I'm invited. And please, you can sleep, but don't snore, because I will try to do some kind of a so-called academic lecture, but I promise I will not be boring. So, playfulness and reordering. Few theological considerations from here and there. Conversation about method of someone's work are not always the most exciting part of discussion, especially if we try to capture the attention of the audience. However, discussion about method can be important, if not crucial, when we are trying to reflect, understand, or summarize trajectory of someone's lifelong research project. How he's doing things, why he's telling us, what's his method. In specific sense, this is what we try to do today, when we celebrate, honor, and acknowledging the rich theological, academic, pastoral career of Andreas Wöhle. I'm honored to be here simply to discuss about this thing, because Andreas is kind of guilty for my theological project, because he forced me and my wife to do PhDs in theology, so indirectly he is responsible for it, and little that he will know that my whole theological project will be criticizing academic theology per se. If I learned anything in my failed pastoral practice and dubious academic career, is that great and original authors are thinking in paradigms, specific patterns of thought and expressions, even gestures. Very often these paradigms are not clearly articulated or even consciously developed, but they are scattered throughout the author's numerous publications and lectures. They must be deciphered and understood, even if they are in their own obscurity and translucence. Play and order is one of the paradigms that Andreas is using in his own theological project, and I will try to say a few things about it. First, I will talk a little bit about law and gospel. Second, I will talk about nature and characteristics of play. And third, I will do some theological interventions. Unfortunately, I have more intuitions than arguments, so please bear with me. One of the fundamental concepts of Lutheran theology is the relation of law and gospel, that is, in Andreas' project, become play and order, or should we say playfulness and reordering. Emphasizes the Lutheran concept of play. Law and gospel are redescribed and repurposed in divergent way as a play and order. To explain the concept of law and gospel, we must take historical detour that starts with a brief philological exercise in etymology. Theologians are usually lovers of the words. They like to kind of mingle what is the original meaning of that word when the word was not sort of a clearly semantically defined. It is important to remind ourselves that original meaning of the words law and gospel, how far are we from the original usage of these words and how they become theological concepts that we use now? Of course, these other questions cannot be answered here. In our case, we would like to experiment and improvise with them and perhaps even play. How should we understand the word nomos and evangelia? After all, this is a question of the method, metahodos. Right? Nomos originally relates to spatial character of land appropriation. We can say more abstractly that nomos described fundamental act of appropriation and ordering of space. Nomos was not mentioned in the Homer, which I always find interesting. Nomos also means dwelling place, district or province. It corresponds with etymological root of the word nemos, which refers to cultic description of forest, grove, or wood. The word nomos comes from nemei, that describes the process of dividing and pasture. Plato wrote the book called The Laws, and it's one of the great authors who is using this word among Solon and Pindar and Heraclitus. It is equally interesting how the word evangel, which is joyful tidings, is original. It is a part of the military jargon that is a loaded political concept associated with the Roman Empire, and it is reported that it's closely related with imperial festivals that celebrate different aspects of Caesar's life. It is a commonplace to mention inscription 9 years.
Sorry, tuned out. It tuned in.
Just hit it.
When I was a punk rocker, we had rehearsal in the band, and the guy says, maybe you should turn on the mic. It works better. Yeah, okay. There is this inscription from year 9 before Christ that it says, this is beginning of joyful tidings related to the birth of God, which means Octavian Augustus. Roman Evangel is a retrospective discourse of what happened in the past that seeks political legitimation. It is opposite of word evangelia or bashar that is always related to the future acts, what God is doing for us. Evangelia is a plural form, and it is used as a technical term. But in the Roman Empire, it is a jargon for one more military achievement of the Roman Empire. When Vespasian reconquered Jerusalem in 69 and extinguished Jewish rebellion, according to unreliable Josephus reports, news that was sent to Rome was described as evangel. It was good news, one more victory for the Roman Empire. How strange and uncomfortable is that the law and gospel, two ways how God is speaking to us, how he revealed himself in the world, have such an awkward theological narrative. It seems that meaning of these words is almost opposite of how we learn to use them and how we use them today. It seems that this problem of today and the problem of usage becomes something that must be thematized if we want to take theological discourse seriously. Huge part of our life today we spend in the virtual reality overstimulating and constantly exhausting. The amount of information we receive is exponentially proportional to our inability to process it. Instead of multiplying perspectives that can potentially be open for us, after receiving so much information, we are scared, frozen, blocked by fear, and addicted to another dose of stimuli. What kind of theological discourse, if any, can provide soothing balm for our cracked soul, tormented mind, and stuffed body? Is there any theologically framed method or sets of methods that can be helpful for conceptualize our world or our position in the world? Let us try to articulate the concept that is seriously and profound enough that it can serve us in the present theological endeavor. And perhaps Andreas and his long theological minding can be intriguing enough to provide such a concept. I'm talking here about the concept of play. Play is not gaming. Right? Play is not gaming that we used to play on computer games, things like that. And order is not virtual simulacra. I'm talking about play as a mode of reordering things. Before I say what is play, I should say what is not, and how I don't understand play. I'm not proposing some kind of a theology of play in any sense, simply because I don't believe that such theology is possible. Similarly, I don't believe that theologies of genitive, theology of play, theology of drinking beer, theology of friendship, theology of sex, theology of this and that are possible or even plausible, because they are always in a secret alliance with identity that is stable, fixed, and it is a sort of essentialism. Worst kind of essentialism is that we claim there is no essence at all. I'm not talking about play like Derrida is talking in his American epigons. I don't find convincing his deconstructive playfulness. It is chaotic play of nihilistic seduction that is ultimately celebrated violence, as I showed in other places. Greek word paideia or paideia it's a very interesting. It does not mean just education. It means something pertaining to children. However, 3 equally loaded words are used as synonyms for playing: paizo, drama, and agum. And they can be translated as a play, festival, and rite. There is a long story about, in European languages and classical Indo-European languages, but there is music is a special kind of play. Playing music is, according to Huizinga, bearing all fundamental characteristics of play, with its power to enter us and transport us into different realms of life. Word play in the European languages always has a strong connotation with erotic play that is wider than allusion for sexual intercourse, as Dutch author is warning us wisely. There is 4 important authors in the 20th century that are related to the problem of play as we want to kind of study here. It is Huizinga, of course, Roger Caillois, Donald Winnicott, and Hugo Rahner. I'm mentioning them only to mention them because I want to look sort of an academic and serious scholar. So, what is the definition of play? How should we understand play? Huizinga, in Homo Ludens, book that is fundamentally important, summing up characteristics of play. He says it's a free activity, standing quite consciously outside of ordinary life as being not serious, but at the same time absorbing the player intensely and utterly. In its activity, connected with no material interest and no profit can be gained by it, it proceeds with its own proper boundaries of time and space, according to the fixed rules and in orderly manner. It promotes formation of a social group in which they tend to surround themselves with secrecy and to stress their difference from the common world of disguised or other means. Roger Caillois is a French philosopher. He wrote an interesting book that is sort of the first one who classified all games of his time into 4 big groups. One is agon, which means based on competition, training, attention, strength, and good qualities. Second is alea, which means throwing the dice, gambling, lottery, roulette, all this kind of games that Huizinga is not even mentioned. Third is mimicry, which is based on temporal acceptance of imaginary parallel universe, and this is synonymous for play as such. It contains invention, creativity, freedom, suspension of reality, and alternative organization of space and time. The last is called illings, which means vertigo. All of the games that are related to perception of changing of perception, hiding, lucidity of gestures, inflicting panic, spasm, seizure, or shock for its own sake. Second author, which I don't want to talk, is a British pediatrician and child psychotherapist who is apparently most quoted in Freud today, called Donald Winnicott, who wrote a book on play. And he says the child that is not capable to play, or human being who is not capable to play, he definitely deserves certain kind of therapy. And this is strong theological temptation. Soon as theologians they don't know what they are talking about, they jump into therapy. Or maybe you should go to therapy. Thank you for telling me something that I already know. But Winnicott is very interesting because he is saying that play is a search for self. It is attempt to be free and develop creativity, and he's for the 40 years observing children playing, adopting, and lots of children who nobody wants to adopt. Last but not least is the interesting one called Hugo Rahner. Less known but more interesting than his famous brother Karl, wrote tiny research called Man at the Play. And he's providing contemplative problematization of the play from a theological point of view. Same as Huizinga, he's starting with Plato. As soon as is Plato in the game, you are entering in the theological discourse from the back door. Plato is important, and I will finish with him, because Plato's understanding of play is his thoughts will determine classical, medieval, and modern understanding what play is all about. However, Rahner is concluding his research with a forgotten Aristotelian virtue of play called eutrapelia. That's a sexy word, eutrapelia. Eutrapelia comes from eutrapelos, which means well-turning, and it is a balance between buffoonery, like kind of buffoons who are making jokes all the time, like Boris Johnson kind of buffoon, you know, and the person who is easily offended. We know all of this easily offended person who say, well, it's a very nice jacket, and says, what do you mean? I said, it's a very nice jacket. So it means my jacket from yesterday was not nice? No, I just said it's a nice jacket. You know, kind of like very, very easily offended person. So eutrapelos is the one who is in between, who is relaxed, refined, and he is capable to talk nicely and decently, something that we kind of lost in all of this sort of a social media shebang we live in. Early church fathers didn't like eutrapelia because in Ephesians chapter 5, Paul warned us that we should not be smart when we talk. He was kind of against smartness of talking, and it was abused by anti-Semites like John Chrysostom, who would say that play is something the devil is doing to Christians, so we should avoid any form of play. Unfortunately, people like Thomas Aquinas will save the situation. I'm not big Thomas fine, but at least he got something right. In Nicomachean Ethics, he sort of recovered Aristotelian idea of eutrapelia when kind of Hugo Rahner kind of rediscovered it, in a sense. Ivan Ilic, my fellow countryman Croatian, discreetly promoted eutrapelia as a part of conviviality. And he translated so nicely, very sexy, charmingly. He says, it is graceful playfulness. Graceful playfulness. Fasten your seatbelts. We are landing. Finally, Plato. Plato wrote book Laws where he's problematized idea of play, right, in the context of the state laws. He intimates how human beings are God's toys. And this is the way how God expressed his favor, which is quite interesting. How God expressed his favor toward human beings. This also means that for him, life is divinely structured. Consequently, we must take part in it, order our lives around it, and according to Plato, this should be the content of our lives. The only way to participate in the true nature of the things, according to Plato, is to learn how to play and to be engaged in the best possible way in a quite different frame of mind. For him, to be engaged in games and playing is a quite different frame of mind. Opposite of the frame of mind we have now. For him, we must relearn to become ridiculous, stupid, kind of crazy a little bit. Because this is the only way to understand the seriousness of life in general. Play is how we take part in divine life through intuitive imitation. God, he says, is worthy of the most blessed seriousness, and plays should be enacted with utmost seriousness, unlike human affairs. This is a precondition to put God in the center of our thoughts that will lead us to the best way of life. What does it Plato try to say? What does it mean? Why he is telling us that we have to learn to play, to be playful, to be ridiculous almost up to the point that we take life serious? He says, and I think there is something there. Old Plato was not wrong. Spending life at a play means sacrificing, singing, and dancing. With sacrifice, we can receive or earn or be capable to absorb favor of God. Secondly, we can protect ourselves from a different and possible enemies, and we can conquer them in the battles of life. To do that, a person has to follow rules and regulations that Plato is proposing in the Book of Laws. That's the reason why he's writing Book of Laws, because he tried to institutionalize play, education with play. This is the way we depart from Plato. For him, it is not enough to play. The play should be ordered by rules, but play must be organized, legitimatized, and controlled ultimately by state, city-state. We don't need to depart in some kind of a holy melancholy because he called us toys of gods. Just opposite, it will be good to wholeheartedly accept the idea of God who creates through play, and to accept that creation is an act of playfulness, as Runner modestly suggested. Hugo, not Carl, of course. In other places, like Timaeus, Plato will intimate that world order is divine play. The whole world is ordered by divine play. That will be enough for early Jewish and Christian thinkers to interpret that. Particularly, a close reader of Plato was the Philo of Alexandria, who will show that reality is a play of divine logos. That whole reality is a play of divine logos. In Book of Proverbs, in the Hebrew Bible, chapter 8, it says that divine wisdom, Chokmah, was present when God created the world, and she was playing before God's face in his presence. Such a poetic and beautiful image. These are important theological points, and we are landing now. Prepare for landing, fasten seatbelts. Once again, we are coming down. People like Maximus Confessor, he says in his Ambigua, when he interprets church fathers, he tries to kind of explain their writings. He says that this life, in comparison to eternal life, looks like a play. If this is true, how much we have to trust in playfulness and human creativity as participation in God's life, God's play. This is not just act of desperate escape from the savageness of capitalistic rationality, but play is always enactment of life. It is embodiment of creative play, not not as resistance for the sake of resistance, but play is creative act against brutal invasiveness of omnipresent algorithmic deception we live now. Thank you very much for very attentive listening. I'm so honored to be here once again, and if you have some allergic reactions to my paper, please find me during the coffee and I will be more than happy to prove you wrong. Thank you. This looks like it's planned, really. Thank you.
To play is the only way for me to play as a child in the moment. Stop time, no borders, create. What goes wrong is good in a way. The antiphone in the middle of a song, play. Daring to open up, create from zero. Questioning the old, questioning the new. To be or not to be. Now that is a good question for a play, for a theater, but also for in a church to say. Do I play when I play as I say that I play? Or is the play, oh no, I got carried away anyway, have a nice day, playful, bye.
Thank you, Boris, for your beautiful introduction. Yes, there it is. To the theme of our conference by taking us on a journey along history and the meaning and the theological significance of words. Thank you for that. We will now be introduced to our next piece of music by Nat McGowan, who is, amongst others, composer, flutist, and musicologist. And he will tell us about methodology and structure in his musical composition, Ricochet. Next, Ricochet will be played to us by Nat McGowan and Keiko Shigio, pianist and fourth pianist.
play our piece of music, I would like to talk to you a little bit about my ideas, which were influenced by other people's ideas about the experience of us being here today, of us interacting in this moment. I also want to thank you for being here, and I also want to congratulate Andreas for this wonderful event. What an honor to be here, and we're so happy to not only to present, but indeed to be in discussion and interaction with you, as we will be doing with our performance too. So we're going to play this piece of music, and you will have an experience of that piece of music. But what are the factors that go into that experience? I just want to kind of take this apart a little bit and try to understand. Because you may be thinking, oh, well, you're just going to play the piece, we're going to listen to the piece, and we're going to experience the piece. And indeed, this piece of music is one facet of that experience. It has its story to tell. But even if we know the story, it can still be unexpected, like this performance of the Bach, which we've heard hundreds of times, had this really wonderful moment in it when the key got stuck. And then, all of a sudden, we didn't know what was going to happen. And there was this, for me, it was really one of my favorite moments of the piece, to see how this was going to get solved. I love these unexpected moments in the piece, in performances. And as a composer, sometimes I look for strategies to create them, just to mix it up and play around a bit. So we have the music. It's its story. But we also have this space, right? This space is also informing our experience. We are here in a church. It has a certain resonance. It has a layout. It has an atmosphere. And those are all shaping what our experience is. The fact that it is in a church and not a concert hall or a living room has a lot to do with it, because those other spaces may infer different behaviors, different ways of experiencing what is taking place. So we already now, we have the music, we have the space, and then of course the other really big determiner of your experience is you yourself. Because, of course, all of you sitting here, you all have a unique identity. And I like to look at someone's identity on 3 different levels, which I'd like to tell you about. Number 1, the universal characteristics of being human, which we all have. For example, breathing. We all breathe. Or we all have a tendency to move to music, right? This is also a sort of physiological tendency built into all humans. And so we have these universal qualities which we all have. On the second level, you have the cultural level. So all of us come from somewhere. We have grown up, we have been raised, we interact in a culture, and that has informed ways of thinking, and patterns, and ways of understanding information. And what language you speak also has a big influence on that. Now, the third level are, of course, your personal qualities, which are made up of your individual experiences, your mind, your body, even your mood at this moment. This is all very individual and personal. So, if you look at these 3 different levels, the universal, cultural, and the personal, this is what makes you unique. As a matter of fact, you are different than any other person who has ever lived in the history of the human race, right? So, and that has to be like that. And so we have to understand that those characteristics are also really informing what you understand about the space and the music. Now, this is the crucial point, because these things are maybe clear, but in this moment today, these things, the music, the space, the listener, they're all in interaction. So, for example, we're going to play this piece of music, and we're going to listen to how it sounds. And we may think, oh, it's quite resonant here. So we take a little bit slower tempo to give time for the music to sound. We may be concentrating here, and our concentration may influence your concentration. But on the other hand, when I'm performing, I'm also paying attention to you. Just like right now, I'm looking into your eyes, and I can see if you're concentrating or not. So when we're playing this piece of music, if I see you shuffling or reading or writing, I might think, oh, it's maybe not going so well, so let's speed up, right? This might be something I might do. The interaction of this moment, of what's going on in this very space. So, the other type of interaction I want to talk about is time. And this is actually more personal for you, because when you're listening to a piece of music, you could know that every moment in that piece of music is comprised of 3 different temporalities. So, at any moment, there's the music which is sounding, the notes, the physical gestures, the resonance. So you're hearing that at any one moment. But before that, there was other music. So now we have this what took place in the past, or as what Boris was talking about, the retrospective discourse, right? So what happened in the past is now influencing what you're hearing now. Is it the same? Is it a repetition? Is it different? And the sum of those 2 moments, the past and the present, is then enabling you to predict what's coming in the future. And you may do that consciously, or you may not do that. It may be subconscious, or it may not be your goal. You may just try to live in the moment. But we are always a product of what came before, where we are now, and where we are going. And it's my own personal belief that that's one of the beautiful things about music, is the interplay of those 3 elements. And me as a composer, I might play with that. I might try to make you think I'm going in one direction and then unexpectedly change it. Those are the kinds of things that I might be working on. But these 3 different temporalities and how they connect to each other are also informing your experience. So what we learn is that a piece of music, it's not a singular fixed experience. It's just a score written on a piece of paper that activates an experience, a sound. It activates the sound which is performed in the space, listened to by individuals, which are all in interaction with each other. And so every experience of a performance, even the same piece of music, will always be different because of how this works. Now, Andreas and I, we sometimes talk about the parallels between giving a sermon and playing a piece of music, because I think a pastor's sermon also falls under these same variables, being brought to life in the moment through the interaction of the pastor, the message, congregation, and the space. And in that respect, I always feel a kinship for a service and the person who's running it. You know, we are all activators of experiences. So, let me come to the piece of music, because this is all leading up to that. This is a piece about interaction. And the thing about interaction, if you want to say interaction between two things, that implies that there's distance between them. They're not the same, they are apart, so they interact with each other. And this piece is literally a musical study on separation and interaction. So, it's called Ricochet, and throughout the entire piece, the contrabass flute, that's this big thing I will play, and the piano, we never have a note together. We're always separate. You can listen to this. We're constantly alternating, ricocheting off of each other. But despite this perpetual distance between articulations of sound, the two parts are tightly wound together through their mutual interactions. So in that respect, this piece is a sort of musical representation of these ideas I've been talking about. The piece is in 7 sections. It lasts about 14 minutes, I'll tell you that now. And each of the sections explores this interaction in a different way. So, let's shape this experience together.
Zij zal spreken over katholiciteit als geloofsbenadering en hermeneutische attitude. She will present an out-of-the-box approach that seeks the kaptolos, the wholeness of the church, a shared experience, nourishing rather than riches. Dorotja, the floor is yours.
Goedemorgen, geachte Anwesenden. Guten Morgen, Sie alle, die heute wegen Andreas nach Amsterdam gekommen sind. Good morning, you all who came from nearby or far away to experience another day in theology.outofthebox.org. But wait a minute, what is that out of the box? In Austral slang, it is something remarkable or exceptional, extraordinary. In the US, if you come out of the box in a particular way, you begin an activity in that way. If you are first out of the box, you are the first person to do something. But out of the box, in the highly commodified word, can also mean a product that is usable immediately out of the box. Nevertheless, with Andreas, you always need a verb to be around the box. Well, cooking out of the box? That might happen, but surely thinking and feeling out of the box. And be aware, the German language tends to translate thinking out of the box with querdenken. That's a tricky thing nowadays because querdenken is highly claimed by the right-wing people. So be aware how language changes and how this out of the box might change too. Querdenken. We are getting perhaps still closer to the truth. But which truth? The truth, thinking, theologizing out of the box. Dear all, invited by Andreas, I stand here in front of you and hope to present you Catholicity out of the box. Under which out of the box category will it fall? You will have to judge it yourself afterwards. My intention is to think out of the box and to feel out of the box and to do it in the first instance in Dutch because Andreas asked me to do so. Out of the box. Katholiciteit doorleeft met de definitie van het Algemene Nederlands Woordenboek. Out of the box. buiten de vaste, gebruikelijke denkkaders, vanuit een heel nieuwe invalshoek. Outside the box. Creatief, lekker, onorthodox. Mijn niet verborgen agenda voor de komende 20 minuten of zo is om u uit te nodigen om na te denken over katholiciteit vanuit een bepaalde hermeneutiek en christelijke theologische praxis die misschien veel goeds te bieden heeft voor samenlevingen gekenmerkt door verschillend denken, geloven, doen en spreken. Voor samenlevingen waarin wij misschien wel allemaal merken dat velen niet door één deur kunnen of durven met elkaar. We doen dit nadenken net als bij dansen in een triple stap, quick, quick, slow. If you wish, 3 stappen, getting to the box, thinking in the box and thinking out of the box. Uiteraard, dit in de traditie van die perichoresis, dat is ook een soort of dans van die Triniteit. In godsgemeenschap, in mensengemeenschap, in scheppingsgemeenschap. Getting to the box. Eerste stap. Van een willekeurige knowledge valorization type artikel dat gelovigen probeert te scholen, citeer ik. Katholiek komt van het Griekse bijvoeglijk naamwoord katholikos, dat universeel betekent. Het bijwoord katholou bestaat uit het voorvoegsel kata, dat onder meer naar, betreffende of volgens betekent. En holos, dat heel betekent. Iets is dus katholiek als het gericht is op het geheel. De Griekse woordenboek kunnen dit lemma, laat staan de theologische woordenboeken, kunnen dit lemma niet in een paar regels samenvatten, omdat ze meteen in de complexiteit en het brede veld van het gebruik van dit woord in beeld proberen te brengen. Ik zou u willen vragen om niet te vergeten van deze complexe, willekeurige publiekscholing één ding mee te nemen. Dat katholieken, wie katholieken, wat katholiek is, gaat altijd over het geheel, over het tutti, over het absolute, de whole, das Ganze. Sommige christenen onder ons kennen dit begrip vanuit de geloofsbelijdenissen. Andere christenen kijken terughoudend naar alles wat katholiek klinkt. Hun voorouders, vooral voorvaders, hebben het door begrippen zoals algemeen of universeel vervangen. Voor de niet-christenen onder ons, die misschien met gedachten spelen, what is? Playing around. Is this perhaps a storm in a cup of tea, as it is so often the case with Christian fellows discussing concepts and trying to go for a politically correct expression, as so often our church leaders do? Zeg ik maar, hier gaat het echt over iets wezenlijk, namelijk over de vraag naar samenhang, over het principe van alles hangt met alles samen. En dat alles wordt bepaald door het bestaan, het leven. Nu is het zo dat deze katholos en katholicus heel vroeg gelinkt werd met dat wat onze voorouders als kerk of vergadering, u ziet het, katholieke ecclesia, hebben genoemd. En met deze stap zijn we zeker in de box. In de box van de katholieke kerk, van de kerk die katholiek is, waar ieder van ons zijn, haar genealogie heeft. En dit is meteen een dubbele verboksing. Aan de ene kant, de kerk wordt in de box van die katholiek gezet, en andersom, het katholieke gevangen in een box of in de box van de kerk. Vanochtend gaan we vooraan naar dat laatste kijken, naar dat katholieke gebokst in de kerk. Katholiciteit in de box. geschiedenis van die katholieke kerk kent verschillende fasen en theoretische benaderingen in die afgelopen 2000 jaar. Ik wil slechts één benadering noemen die ons misschien gaat helpen om steeds meer out of the box te gaan denken. 10 jaar voordat de kerkdenker Andreas Wöhle in Braunschweig ter wereld kwam, werd in Amsterdam in augustus 1948 de Wereldraad van Kerken officieel opgericht. En voor deze sociopolitieke theologiserende raad en ook voor hun belangrijkste theologische dialoogpartner, de Rooms-Katholieke Kerk, kregen de conventionele kenmerken van de kerk één, heilig, katholiek en apostolisch fundamentele relevantie. Want hoe de verschillende kerken deze concepten begrepen, uitgelegd hebben, uitleggen, herkauwen, zou de ecumenische beweging versterken of verzwakken. En men, vooral weer de mannen, excuses voor deze gendernoot, gingen los. En tegen de tijd dat Andreas Wöhle geboren was, en zeker toen hij begon te lezen, lag er een heel nieuw, vers corpus onderzoek naar katholiciteit. Katholiciteit van de kerk, door de eeuwen heen. Niet te vergeten dat Andreas nog niet eens 1 maand oud was toen Paus de 12e stierf en Andreas nog geen 6 weken oud was toen net voor hervormingsdag Paus Johannes de 23e gekozen werd, die dan voor het Tweede Vaticaan het groen licht gaf. Inmiddels zijn we bij de 7e paus die Andreas bewust en lezend meemaakt. Katholiciteit werd een zeer bestudeerd onderwerp in de tijden, een zaak van het weer uitzoeken van hoe deze term het samenleven na 2 wereldoorlogen, na een Auschwitz en in tijden van wat men Koude Oorlog begon te noemen. Ik uit Oost-Europa begrijp nog steeds niet wat dat Koude Oorlog betekent als term. Er moest heel wat uitgezocht worden over wat de kerk is en wat er nog überhaupt overgebleven is van die geloofwaardigheid van de kerk. Het leven met elkaar als christenen overal, ook de term Word Christianity krijgt populariteit in die tijd. Eind jaren 50, begin jaren 60. Een van die grote namen die in Nederland veel en in verschillende levensfasen, ook voor en tijdens de oorlog, over katholiciteit schreef, was, nou wie was dat? Wie herkent dat gezicht? Hendrikus Berghof. Zeker een out-of-the-box theoloog in zijn tijd. Zijn teksten over katholiciteit gingen door heel Europa. Tijdens Pinksteren 1962 schreef hij in het voorwoord van zijn boekje De Katholiciteit der Kerk dat er met dit begrip veel op het spel staat. Playing Theology. En dat hij hoopt dat zijn bijdrage in het teken van groeien naar het volle mag staan. Zonder welke geen kerk zich katholiek kan noemen en zonder welke de ecumenische woorden en daden bij slagen in de lucht blijven. Ook lekker sportief, zoals de kerk en theologen altijd zijn. Ik gebruik zijn boekje van 1962 ter illustratie, want wat ik daar zie is een paradigma hoe men nog steeds vooral mannen, en ik kijk met grote voldoening hier rondom in deze zaal hoeveel ecumenische vrouwen er niet zitten. Dank voor jullie aanwezigheid en dank voor die mannen die rondom die tijd, eind jaren 50, begin jaren 60, toch in staat waren om ruimte te creëren, ook voor vrouwen. Dit paradigma zie ik dus ik gebruik zijn boekje, Berghofs boekje van 1962 ter illustratie, want wat ik daar zie is een paradigma hoe men zoals gezegd nog steeds vooral mannen in die tijd, met het denken over katholiciteit omgaan. Dit paradigma zie ik dan in alle hoeken van de ecumenische beweging terugkomen en is ook, zonder die veel reflectie over reformatiegeschiedenis, in Rooms-katholieke kringen tot op heden zichtbaar. Het paradigma heeft een aantal opvallende componenten. Allereerst, de mannen gaan op zoek naar het vinden van het eerste gebruik van de samenstelling katholieke kerk. En op die manier wordt er een genealogie gemaakt die meestal begint bij Ignatius van Antiochië en dan gaat verder met Kyrillus van Jeruzalem, via Augustinus, in het geval van het protestantse theologen met een enorm grote sprong van belijdenisschriften naar Luther en zijn gebrek aan gebruik van katholiciteit en naar Calvijn, een DNA desoxyribonucleïnezuur, let op, zuur, acidum, op het spoor weten te komen waarin op het zogenaamde kwantitatieve of kwalitatieve katholiciteit herkenbaar is in die genealogie van de kerk als katholiek. En afhankelijk van met wie men samen in de boot stapt, wordt die ene of die andere geen zichtbaarder en ook voelbaarder. Die kwantitatieve katholiciteit staat voor het geografische geheel van de kerk overal op de bewoonde aarde. Dit is een soort kijk, Christus regeert en hij houdt zijn woord en zijn macht wordt openbaar op heel de aarde, zoals Berkhoff dat zo mooi schreef. Maar ja, u hoort, katholiciteit gaat om Christus, maar niet zonder kerk. En in dit soort DNA-materiaal is dat nog steeds sterk te vinden. Erfgoed, hè? DNA, erfgoed. Naast die kwantitatieve geen ontdekken onze theologen, vooral mannen, zoals net gezegd, ook een kwalitatief geen. En dat staat voor de alle waarheid omvattende aard van de kerk. En dit genetisch materiaal meenden de theologen van de ecumenische beweging ook bij Kyrillus van Jeruzalem aan met grote zekerheid te ontdekken. En deze zekerheid leidden ze af van Kyrillus' woorden dat de kerk, ecclesia, over de ganse aarde, Erdkreis, bestaat. Let op, we hebben het over de tweede helft van de 4e eeuw, wat is dan gans heelal. En dat de kerk alles leert, onderwijst over zichtbare en onzichtbare gebeurtenissen in de hemel en op aarde en alles in huis heeft wat een mens nodig heeft. Dan wordt de genealogie meestal voortgezet door het kijken naar de tijden van die reformatie. En meestal wordt geconstateerd dat in de tijden weinig zichtbaar wordt over het genetische materiaal van de katholiciteit. Maar die contra-reformatie, wat een label, opereerde weer met de sterke genen van die katholiciteit, ofwel kwalitatief ofwel kwantitatief. In mijn beperkt kunnen kijken naar bronnen, heeft deze manier van genealogische opbouw geleid tot het steeds meer denken over het eigen van die katholiciteit in de verschillende confessies. De vraag naar de katholiciteit werd steeds, in plaats van de vraag naar de katholiciteit van de kerk, of überhaupt wat katholiciteit betekent, wat dat katholisch zou moeten betekenen, de vraag naar de katholiciteit van mijn eigen kerk, mijn eigen confessie, mijn eigen traditie. En dan krijgen we verdere boxen, zoals gereformeerde katholiciteit, Lutherse katholiciteit, baptisten-katholiciteit, totdat de boemerang terugslaat en er zelf binnen enkele confessies over de ware, bijvoorbeeld ware Lutherse katholiciteit, gevochten wordt. Ik heb een die sla ik even over, maar ik denk dat we ook zonder voorbeelden dit herkennen, zelfs in ons eigen land. En om niet heel ver van huis te gaan binnen ons eigen BKN. Nogmaals, mijn slechts beperkt kunnen kijken naar bronnen doet me vragen of de historiografie rondom katholiciteit geleid door de juiste vragen geconstrueerd is. Men heeft een begrip, in dit geval de kerk als katholiek, maar waarom is het zo belangrijk om een beginpunt van het gebruik van dat vast te leggen? Vastgelegde historiografieën zijn hardnekkig en ze leven door. Katholiciteit in de box wordt dus gespeeld met labeltjes plakken, betekenissen vastleggen, genetisch materiaal benoemen. Er wordt veel met kerk gespeeld. Veel kerk gespeeld. En veel van de speling wordt tot uitvechten dat gebroederlijke mondde heel vaak uit in broedermoord. In hoeverre is er een reset mogelijk, een game over, een restart? Kijken met nieuwe ogen, kijken naar hoe dingen met elkaar nog steeds samenhangen, ook tijdens broedermoord. Steh auf. Es muss gespielt werden. Täglich muss es neu gespielt werden. Täglich muss die Antwort noch vor uns sein. Die Antwort muss ja sein können, wenn du nicht aufstehst, Abel. Wie soll die Antwort, diese einzige wichtige Antwort, sich je verändern? Wir können alle Kirchen schließen und alle Gesetzbücher abschaffen und alle Sprachen der Erde, wenn du nur aufstehst und du rückgängig machst die erste falsche Antwort auf die einzige Frage, auf die es ankommt. Steh auf, damit kein sagt, damit er sagen kann, ich bin dein Hüter, Bruder. Wie sollte ich nicht dein Hüter sein? Täglich steh auf, damit wir es von uns haben, dies Ja, ich bin hier, ich, dein Bruder. Hier ergens begint voor mij katholiciteit out of the box. En zoals u ziet, raakt uiteindelijk zelf de vraag over katholiciteit aan de vraag van het leven. Ook waarheid genoemd. Maar in de zoektocht naar de waarheid wordt heel vaak het kind met het badwater weggegooid. Ja, in dit geval het kind, met grote letters. Ja, in het spreken over katholiciteit krijgt de kerk de centrale plek. Het draait om ecclesiologie. En natuurlijk wordt er dan ook over het kind, de broeder Jezus, gesproken. Maar vanuit een christelijke identiteit vraagt het begrippen van katholiciteit van dat alles met alles samenhangt, naar expliciete Christologie. We hebben van Jezus al alles gemaakt, van vrouw tot migrant, alles. Maar wat doen we met die Christusvraag, met die vraag over die gezalfde? Door een bepaalde lezing van de brieven wordt Paulus heel sterk ecclesiologisch ingezet. Maar zelfs Paulus' mantra is dat: en Christus, en Christus, en Christus. in Christus. En als we teruggaan naar de evangelie, dan spreekt Jezus Christus, de gezalfde, niet over de kerk, maar over Gods koninkrijk. Dat komt, dat zichtbaar wordt. Een nieuwe focus op Christus, Christologie zal onze worstelingen, ook hier in Nederland, over kerk zijn, ecclesiologie, toekomstgerichte kerk, verder helpen. Zelfs ons Lutherse Est Autem Ecclesia Congregatio Sanctorum, de verzameling van die heiligen waarin het evangelie zuiver geleerd wordt en waarin de sacramenten op de juiste wijze bediend worden, verdiept kunnen worden. Maar zeker de tendens om de wereld niet meer in sacrale en niet-sacrale te onderscheiden of te verdelen. Vrede, miljarden. Denk aan die gelijkenis van de zuurdezen. Daar wordt die term holon, het geheel, genoemd. Het koninkrijk der hemelen lijkt op een zuurdezen die een vrouw neemt en verbergt in 3 maten meel, totdat het geheel gezuurd is. Het geheel, katolon, alles. Voor mij begint daar ergens die uitdaging om gedachten te maken over katholiciteit, totdat het geheel gezuurd is. Dexoxribonucleïne zuur. Het geheel door Gods koninkrijk, niet door de kerk. Is dat niet cooking grapes? Beste Andreas? Of in dit geval baking grapes? Natuurlijk blijft de kerk een belangrijke theologische notie en belevenis van dat doorzuren. Maar het is Gods koninkrijk en niet de kerk in haar eentje die uitziet naar Christus om. In onze taalbeperkingen als christenen, Gods koninkrijk komt in Christus, de gezalfde, en het wordt leven in alles, in alle tijden en overal. En dit is onze taak om over katholiciteit te denken. Alles, het geheel, kol in het Hebreeuws. Echt, geheel. Om over katholiciteit na te denken. Alles dat je herkent en ziet. En dat doorleven begint niet in de kerk of met de kerk. Zelfs niet in onze kleine of grotere ego's. De kerk, wij zijn onderdeel van dat erfgoed. Om dat out of the box denken over katholiciteit nog verder uit te spelen, kan ik en wil ik niet al mijn kaarten op tafel leggen, laat staan mijn voetnoten bij deze lezing. Wil ik ons eraan herinneren hoe dat wat alles aangaat in het dagelijks leven gebeuren zal. We hebben het gehoord, we horen het elke dag. Liefhebben zul je de Heer, je God, uit heel heel je hart, uit heel je ziel, uit heel je verstand en uit heel je kracht. Tweede is dit: liefhebben zul je je naaste. Hij, zij is aan jou gelijk. Een ander gebod, een andere belofte, een andere hoop, groter dan deze, ken ik niet. In theologische zin begint de vraag naar de katholiciteit hier ergens, met het beeld van de zuurdezen, met liefhebben, werkwoord, liefhebben, katholiciteit doorleeft. Dank u voor uw aandacht.
Dankjewel, Doortje. Ook jij hebt ons meegenomen op reis, ook door de geschiedenis, de box in. door de box moeten om de box-out te kunnen komen. Dankjewel. We now have a break. Geniet van een moment van gesprek en nadere overweging en voor de verzorging van de inwendige mens. En zorg er alsjeblieft om weer terug te zijn om 12:40, 1:50, voor het vervolg van ons programma. Please be back at 12:40. how we can still speak of God as King in today's world, where traditional religious language often feels distant or problematic. He draws on Lutherse political theology and Charles Hartshorne's process theology. Alexander, where?
Hi.
Ah, there you are. Please.
Thank you. Do I need to do anything? Because then... Work?
Hello, can you hear me? Good. So thank you very much for this invitation, Andreas. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's also not really self-explanatory or self-evident that the rabbi should speak here. So we're kind of doing a next step out of the box of, we spoke about already Catholicity. Actually, there was one rabbi who spoke about Catholicity in Jewish terms. Schechter, his name was. And he spoke about Catholic Israel, not in the sense of Catholic Church, obviously, but as kind of the global community of Jewish communities, Jewish ideas, and mostly people. But we'll see. So, what I will do today, or in this half an hour, I would like to share some reflections drawn from my own contribution to the first Schrift. I will talk about the metaphor of Melech. Melech in Hebrew is king or sovereign, and how it can be understood today. And my aim is to present not just an abstract analysis, but a set of images and ideas that respond to questions that we, I hope, all raise. How can we speak about God in a world suspicious of religious authority? How can our theological language remain both faithful and liberating? Two themes from your thought, Andreas, frame my paper. First, the difficulty of religious language today. Our traditional metaphors often sound foreign and even alienating in contemporary ears. Second, your engagement with Wöhle and her political theology, which questions divine omnipotence as a justification for suffering and resonates with process thinkers like Charles Hartshorne, which is my favorite thinker. So this dual concern, language and power, comes to the front of one of the most central religious metaphors we share across Judaism and Christianity, the metaphor of God as king, as sovereign, as Melech. Religious language is embedded in historical and cultural contexts. The notion of God as king once resonated deeply with societies governed by monarchs claiming absolute power. Reference to divine kingship conveyed strength, justice, and supreme authority. And this authority surpassing the claims of their earthly rulers. The divine king was envisioned as able to triumph over oppressive regimes. And this strengthened hope. However, in contemporary democratic societies, where authority is decentralized and absolute monarchy is largely obsolete, this metaphor may appear increasingly alien or even problematic. A God conceived as an absolute sovereign risks being aligned with theological frameworks that justify suffering and submission to status quo, and often involved in attempts to resolve the problems of theodicity. The difficulties posed by divine kingship align with broader theological critiques of omnipotence. Wöhle's political theology challenges traditional theological structures that legitimize authoritarianism and oppression, calling instead for theology that empowers communities and fosters justice. Similarly, process theology or neoclassical theology, particularly as articulated by Charles Hartshorne, reinterprets divine power not as coercion, but as persuasion. Instead of all-powerful ruler, God is understood as relational, working dynamically within the world to inspire transformation rather than dictate outcomes. What are the practical implications of this theological shift? If the metaphor of God as king no longer resonates or proves problematic, how can theology articulate divine sovereignty in ways that remain meaningful? The challenge is not merely about replacing one metaphor with another. Of course, one can talk about God as king or God as father or mother, another metaphor. But we try to kind of foster a theological language that both is faithful to tradition and intelligible to contemporary communities. If divine kingship is to remain a viable metaphor, it must be reinterpreted in ways that emphasize responsibility, empowerment, and relationality rather than arbitrary power and control. And here Hartshorne becomes a vital conversation partner. Hartshorne seeks language that avoids both extremes. Either language is entirely inadequate to describe God, there are some theologians saying that we cannot say anything about God, or it can do so with complete certainty and clarity. So we say we know everything, we know the way to truth, and our way is the way. So taking into account that our language and our knowledge of divine is extremely limited, ultimately we worship God not because of what God is not or lacks, but because of God's quote, positive and all-encompassing love and beauty. So we need to have some positive definition, at least working definition, of what God is, not just what God is not. Hartshorne's rejection of classical theism centers on its portrayal of God as unchanging and impassible being, a view that deems logically inconsistent and existentially inadequate. Classical theism, rooted in Aristotelian thought, postulates divine immutability as a honor of perfection. To be perfect is to be unchanging. God promotes the well-being of the creatures and nonetheless remains unaffected by their circumstances. Hartshorne argues this conception reduces God to a distant, static monarch incapable of genuine relationship with the world, rendering divine love and responsiveness incoherent. God's perfection is not based on immutability, but in being unsurpassed by anything or anyone else. God may still surpass himself, making God, as Hartshorne says, the self-surpassing surpasser of all. Self-surpassing surpasser of all. Hartshorne envisions God as dipolar, balancing complementary qualities rather than rigid opposites, both necessary and contingent, eternal and temporal, absolute and relative. And this middle ground approach allows to uphold divine perfection without reducing God to an inert, static being. It distinguishes between God's primordial nature, which represents the eternal source of all possibilities and the organizing principle of reality, and God's consequent nature, which is dynamically engaged with the universe. While the primordial nature provides order and invites novelty, the consequent nature fully absorbs the world's experience. It kind of feels the feelings of all creatures. Engaging with Abraham Joshua Heschel, who's a very important rabbi in the 20th century, engaging with his view of God as the most moved mover, that's the term of Heschel, most moved mover, as opposite to unmoved mover of Aristotelian thought. Hartshorne refines it further, describing God as the most and best moved mover. Through his relational participation, God evolves, not in essence, but in experience, integrating all joys and struggles into an ever-deepening divine reality, where creatures are part creators of God. Hartshorne's rethinking of divine omnipotence challenges classical theism's foundational claim that God possesses absolute unilateral power over creation. Hartshorne agrees that for God to be worthy of worship, quote, that must in power excel of all others. That means the highest conceivable power must be the divine power. But is it the highest ideal of power, he asks, to rule over puppets who are permitted to think they make decisions, but who are really made by another to do exactly what they do? For 20 centuries we have had theologians who seem to say yes to this question. Hartshorne argues if God monopolizes all power, creatures are rendered powerless, and that contradicts the reality of self-determining beings. And he aligns with Plato's sophist, asserting that being, just being itself, is already power. So every entity, however small, whether it's a human being, a fly, or an atom, possesses some capacity to act and to be acted upon, and by this it limits God's power. He critiques the traditional concept of omnipotence as a misguided ideal that actually, quote, limits God, denies to him any world worth talking about, a world of living, that is to say, significantly decision-making agents. It is the tradition which did indeed terribly limit divine power to foster creativity even in the list of the creatures. So classical omnipotence implies that God could unilaterally eliminate evil, yet suffering persists, creating an absolute, insoluble theodicy problem. If God controls all outcomes, divine benevolence becomes indefensible. Hartshorne instead argues that evil arises from the inherent risks of a universe where creatures exercise genuine freedom. Or, in line with our conference, it's a consequence of the risk of playing. Because any play, although you have rules, it's an open-end development, and there are always risks of things going wrong. So coercive omnipotence would negate moral responsibility. If God determines all actions, human choices become illusory. Instead, Hartshorne posits that creativity is distributed with all beings, from subatomic particles to humans possessing self-determining power. Thus, divine power is not absolute but relational, working in cooperation with creation rather than imposing control. And building on this relational view of divinity, Hartshorne contends that God's love is not merely abstract benevolence, but involves real participation in creaturely experiences. God feels the feelings of all creatures, including their sufferings. Divine love entails both action for the welfare of others and sympathetic participation in their experiences. God is, to quote another important process thinker, Whitehead, is a great companion, the fellow sufferer who understands. So in this theology, God, this kind of dipolar God that has essence that is not changeable, but also some elements of divine personality that is reflective and filling all creation. You can also go into other direction and say that we all creation directly feel God. So what after all this excursion, how can we reimagine the metaphor of melech, of king, in you? And there are several voices to help us here. Rabbi Jill Hammer reinterprets the Hebrew word malach, traditionally translated it as to rule. Rather than reinforcing hierarchy, she aligns malchut with presence rather than dominion. She makes a connection to the Kabbalistic concept of divine immanence that connects with the Sphira Malchut. So Malchut in Kabbalah, in Kabbalistic discourse, is about divine presence, divine immanence in the world. And therefore, in her translation work, she often renders malach as, or melech as is. So Adonai Malach would be God is, shifting the focus from power to presence. She further proposes translating melech as guide, offering a gentler, more relational understanding of divine rule. Another thinker, Rabbi David Wolf Blank, internalizes melech as a sense of awareness, a harmonizing principle within the self. According to his thoughts, to invoke melech is to align inner discord into coherence. God and human self are deeply interconnected. So melech is not an external force imposing order, but an evolving relational presence within the flags of lived experience. This perspective suggests that sovereignty can be understood as inner sovereignty, the capacity to live integrated, responsible, and free lives. Thus, the metaphor does not disappear but is transfigured, from domination to guidance, from external authority to inward illumination. And this vision of divine kingship parallels with Sufi Persian allegory of the Simur, which similarly frames the idea of divine sovereignty as a process of self-discovery. In The Conference of the Bird, by the Persian poet Farid Din Attar, the birds of the world gather in search of their king. Guided by the wise Hopi bird, they embark on a perilous journey to find the Simur, the king of birds, who is said to reside atop a distant mountain. The journey is filled with immense challenges, and only a fraction of the original travelers complete the quest. Before reaching their destination, the Hopi warns them that the grandeur of the Simurg's majesty is beyond comprehension. To gaze directly upon its splendor would be overwhelming, even fatal. Thus, mirrors have been placed around the palace walls, allowing seekers to glimpse the divine presence indirectly, protecting them from the danger of being consumed by its brilliance. So when the 30 surviving birds finally arrive at the palace of the Simur, they expect to meet their king, but instead they find only a mirror. To their astonishment, in the Simurg's radiant reflection, they see themselves. The revelation is profound. They are the Simurg. The Persian name Simurg itself is a wordplay. It means 30 birds, Simurg. What they sought all along was within them. Their journey, filled with suffering and perseverance, has stripped away illusions and revealed the deepest unity with the divine. As they gaze upon their reflections, they are struggling to reconcile the difference, or lack thereof, between themselves, 30 birds, and the divine. They ask, how is it true that we is not distinguished here from you? The journey has led them not to an external king, but to the realization that divinity is within them. The Melech they sought is not a distant ruler, but their deepest, truest self. They are the key. They are guardians up in hiding, playing the cosmic game of separation and reunion, ultimately made one with the divine presence they had long pursued. This poetic vision of divine kingship reimagines Melech not as a static figure of authority, but as a process of self-discovery, transcendence, and ultimate unity. Rather than a ruler exerting power over subjects, Melech becomes a symbol of guidance, integration, and the awakening of the divine within the human soul. Thus offering a language that can resonate with both theists and non-theists alike. But in my paper I make a bridge from the Simurg, often depicted as a peacock, to the motif of the golden peacock, the golden epade in Yiddish poetry. Like the Simurg, which reflects the inner world of those who encounter it, the golden peacock, the golden epade, in Yiddish poetry symbolizes longing, nostalgia, spiritual or cultural displacement, mirroring the inner landscapes of poets and their communities. So taken together, these perspectives underscore the interpretive fluidity of Melech metaphor. Just as the Simurg is ultimately revealed within the seeker, and the golden peacock reflects the inner world of the poet, Melech emerges as a symbol of deep spiritual awakening. By embracing the Melech as internal guide, or by imagining God as this internal guide, rather than external authority, we open ourselves to a theology of relationality, one that affirms the sacred within the self and within the world, where sovereignty is not imposed from above, but realized from within. Andreas, in honor of your retirement, I trust not your silence, I offer these reflections and the small echo of your lifelong project to imagine God and humanity in ways that empower, liberate, and heal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for relating the theme of our symposium to the beautiful story of the Simurg, the search for the king as a process of self-discovery and deep spiritual awakening. Beautiful message today. Well, time for music again. Nat McCowan, Keiko Chio. Always difficult to pronounce names you don't know yet. Alex Coe and Sir John Ivanovich will bring us some jazzy approaches to life and